So guys, it's January 8th, Monday, January 8th, 12:18 p.m. my time here in Atlanta, Georgia. We just finished filming our Son of Sam Part 2, and I did this intentionally after so we would have this story in our mind. And you guys, for Part 3, we are going to be, which you're watching right now, because this is going to be the introduction to Part 3. Jessica Jones has remote viewed, or is going to remote view this case, and obviously she has no idea. She never has any idea what she's remote viewing, but she's always spot on. She does this for a living. She helps find missing people all the time. And so you guys, we're pre-recording this because I'm going to actually have Catherine pick the blind target. It's called a blind target because Jessica has no idea what it is. So this is how we're going to do it, Catherine. I'm going to have you hold all the information that we just spoke about with Son of Sam, Maury Terry, David Berkowitz, this satanic cult, Undermeyer Park, New York City, this whole thing. Hold everything in your head. And I want you now to give me 8 numbers, 2 sets of 4.
7954 2667.
All right, guys. So Catherine just gave me 7954 2667. That's the blank target. That's all I'm going to be giving Jessica is those numbers. That's it.
I can't wait to see how this works.
It's fabulous. I did this with her with a true crime case. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't know if I can, but let's just say there was a reaction offline to some of the stuff she got, and she's been contacted. So girl knows what she's doing, and so that's all she's going to get, guys. She doesn't know. She never knows if it's a true crime. She never knows if it's something paranormal. And so I'm going to send those to her. She was trained. Before we get into the video today, I just want to give a quick shout out to one of our sponsors, Gnostic TV. Gnostic TV is ancient wisdom reimagined. This is a Netflix for those who are spiritually curious and want a place to go where there is no censorship. I personally am doing a whole series on Gnostic TV called the Esoteric Explorer, where I am providing exclusive content to Gnostic. Gnostic TV is a host to all sorts of different content creators, many of whom are your old favorites. If you would like to check out Gnostic TV, there is a link down in the description box below. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Esoteric Atlanta. Of course, my name is Bryce. I am so excited today because I've got 2 of my favorite ladies in the whole wide world. We're like the global Nancy Drews of the world. We've got, of course, Catherine Edwards. You guys know Catherine Edwards. We do a lot of stuff together. From her channel, Catherine Edwards, and then, of course, Jessica Jones, the Cryptic Huntress, remote viewer extraordinaire, who and guys, you saw from the opening, I filmed Catherine. Catherine gave the coordinates this time, which those numbers were 7954 2667 that I sent to Jessica to remote view. Now, Jessica, just to make things clear, just hand up to God, you have no idea what this target is, do you?
No, I just have some coordinates. I mean, I have some data, so I can tell you what I think it might be, but yeah, no, I don't know what this is.
I want our audience to know that we don't. Catherine, you didn't tell Jessica. I didn't tell Jessica.
I've never spoken to Jessica before, although obviously I've watched your shows together. And when Bryce asked me to come up with the coordinates, it was completely random. I just held the subject matter and my thoughts and just said whatever numbers came straight out to me. And the rest is a mystery. So I am so excited for this.
So I know people who watch you regularly, Jessica, know how this is done, but I want our people out there to know that she has no idea, but she's got data. So I'm going to let you just take it away, Jessica. Let's see your data first, and we'll tell you what it is we had you remote view. How about that?
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Here we go.
Okay. So, well, first of all, when I first went into this target, I feel like I was in a forest or like the woods or something, because I was seeing trees. And so I was writing down some of my sensory data. Oh, God. I hope I'm not totally off target, y'all. Okay. But so I'm seeing green wood. I wrote down woodsy. That's not like sensory data, but I felt like I was in the woods. And actually my sketch for my stage 3 was a bunch of trees. Okay. I wrote down running, hairy, oblong, tight, anxious, burning, late, dizzy, rapid. Those are some of my sensory data. Now, the way I'm interpreting this and things that I'm seeing, I wrote down fuel, trees, treaty, forest, and forest friends. Forest, that's what we call Bigfoot. Okay, so forest friends. I was feeling short-winded and out of breath, having a little anxiety. I wrote down bend, fire, on fire, rapid heart rate, REM. I wrote down turtle. I don't know why I wrote down turtle. But I mean, I don't filter. I have to write down everything. But I wrote down zoned out or in the zone. And then I heard running laps, or I wrote down run laps and burlap because it rhymes, but sometimes I can't figure out what I'm hearing. So I have to write down everything. Okay. So then I wrote down dark, something that was open and vast, but I felt like I was outdoors still. I wrote down army. This is some of my AOL was army, senseless, a new path, trails on the trail, nail on the head. I kept hearing nail on the head, nail on the head. Missing, I wrote down something that was missing information, tourniquet. Okay, like tourniquet, like that you would, sorry, my furry friend's over here crying. Sorry, my personal furry friend. Okay, but a tourniquet like you would wrap around your leg, like if you got cut. Bleeding, and I wrote down bleeding, and I heard will be found. But towards the end of the target, I was feeling lonely and like I was lost. Like there was something that was lost, or a person or a thing. Something was lost, but something I was picking up on some kind of missing data towards the end there. So that's about it in a nutshell right there. I didn't get super more like I didn't get further into the target. Yeah.
The minute you said forest, I kept thinking of Untermeyer Park when this was going on. Like you went back in time, because I know Untermeyer Park at this point has been cleaned up. Catherine, do you want to tell her what we asked about?
Well, you go into the details, but there were quite a few things that put into that. So we were asking about the Son of Sam killings. And Bryce and I have done a couple of episodes based on Untermeyer Park about relation. How deep do you want me to go, Bryce, in terms of how much? I mean,
we'll just talk about it all. Yeah.
So looking at about what really happened, about the actual killings, but also going back in time to links to other cults that were going on. And a lot of what you said there was linking into what we discussed in
the whole missing information. So hold on one second. Let me just grab. Do you know who, Jessica? Do you know who Maury Terry was? Do you know the name Maury Terry? Catherine, I'm going to grab the book because the book just came in the mail. Do you want to fill Jessica in on Maury Terry and his book about?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the Son of Sam killers, and from the UK, I knew nothing about it, but with the Son of Sam killers, basically there was an investigative journalist that called Maury Terry that didn't go for the story at all in terms of what the police had said about the guy that was convicted, so-called, of being the serial killer, the Son of Sam, because a lot of the evidence didn't add up. So he basically spent his whole life really delving deep into the case to see where all the missing links were, what was really going on, how many links there were back to a satanic cult. And unfortunately, he died, and his work was tried to put under the carpet, poo-poo, because the official story had to be they had their man and they weren't looking into it any further.
So basically, and I will link our past episode down in the description box below, guys. But we took this off of Jessica. I had a friend who passed away, Doug Kramer, who was an ex-Scientologist, who stepped back after he got out of his mind control to figure out how he got fooled, like what happened. And he started deeply looking into, before he ever opened up his YouTube channel, the deep roots of Scientology and the three-letter agency, and it led him to the Son of Sam killing. And for those who don't know, David Berkowitz is the guy that's been given the label the Son of Sam. But as you see in this title here, the search for the sons, plural, of Sam. And so David Berkowitz found incredibly overwhelming evidence. I mean, you would have to be
Maury Terry did.
Maury Terry, sorry.
Yeah.
Maury Terry found overwhelming evidence. As we said, you would have to be kind of an idiot to not realize that this was a huge cover-up. And it was coming from a satanic cult. Now, when you said trees, forest, building an army.
Also zoned out. You said zoned out quite a few times because we're looking at a lot of mind control here as well.
Yep, mind control. David Berkowitz has admitted that Maury Terry basically was right. Now, the name Sam is interesting because there's lots of Sams. There's Sam Carr, whose sons, literal sons, was it John and Michael, who both died soon after there was suspicion on them. John of unaliving himself, and Michael of a car accident. And these letters, I don't know, Jessica, how familiar you are with the Son of Sam case. And you're a few years older than me, but I know for me, I remembered hearing about it as a kid, but I didn't know the details. I knew it was some weird story about this guy in New York who heard voices from a dog, and that was it. But when
I'm not familiar at all with it. I mean, I've heard of it, but I don't follow serial killers.
Well, that's what it was just some serial killer or whatever. Well, when I was watching Doug's series on it, I was like, holy shit, this is so much bigger. It connects to Charles Manson through all these different MK Ultra mind control organizations. And these were ritualistic. And the letters, so the Son of Sam left one letter behind at one crime scene where he spoke about, and I might have to bleep these words out, guys, because we're going to try to keep this on YouTube, but drinking blood.
Oh, I wrote down bleeding and blood. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And they found, so Untermeyer Park is in Yonkers, New York. And back in the 70s, so this happened in 1976. So when Jessica, the first thing when you said forest, I was like, she nailed it. Because if you look at pictures from that time of Untermeyer Park, it was very derelict. Now, again, correct me if I'm wrong for all of our Yonkers viewers or people from New York City who go to Untermeyer Park. But what I understand now, it's been cleaned up. But back at that point, it was very derelict and it was very overgrown. And so, and the confusion, this cult would go through this tunnel system from the Carr house, Sam Carr, who was the father of John and Michael, and David Berkowitz, who was a neighbor. And they would take this aqueduct-like tunnel system into Untermeyer Park and do horrific rituals involving German shepherds. It was German shepherds, right? I try to block that out. Listen, it's so much easier to me to hear about humans getting killed than it is about animals. Animals make me just so. And what was it you picked up with furry friends?
Well, it's interesting, you guys, that my German Shepherd is over here was crying when we first started this video. So she's picking up on this, apparently.
And that really is sad. And also, because I was trying to write down everything you said, Jessica, you also said army. Now, was it, which car? Was it John or Michael where he unalived himself?
John was in the army. John was in the army as well as David Berkowitz, but David Berkowitz was honorably discharged after serving for 4 years before the killing started.
Yeah, and his body was found on the army base, and when they went to investigate there, they really got the chills on the army base and just wanted to get out of there.
Yeah, and they said they knew he was practicing witchcraft.
Yeah,
it's wild. It's so fascinating because there's so many different layers, and we didn't even talk about Catherine. We even forgot in our video to talk about Arlene Perry. Was Perry her last name? It was in the early 70s where she was found dead in a church in at Stanford over in California, and she had been ritualistically unalived
and assaulted ritualistically.
And David Berkowitz had sent a letter telling everybody that this was a satanic ritual, an SRA thing. And then later Maury Terry researched into it and he called the killer. He said, this is the guy who did it. he's a warlock, basically called it out for what it is, and no one believed him. And until 2018, they actually made the arrest.
Well, and he unalived himself before he could be arrested.
And he had all the books that they said he would have, the guide, the witchcraft book in there in his house. He even had Maury Terry's book.
But there's something really that's given me goosebumps, because when you were saying about missing, haunted, with that lady who was found in the church, and it was actually the security guard, which again, Maury Terry had called out and everyone dismissed it. But the letter actually said that she'd been followed, hunted down. So she'd escaped and was living there with her husband and had got out of whatever she was involved in. This poor, very young lady, you know, and they'd actually followed her there, found her, and
in a church. Like, she had gone to the church to pray. Well, we know, I mean, I know churches are not anything holy, but most people feel safe in a church. That's where they seek sanctuary, and that's where she was taken out. And so there is so much to this case, and I will tag Doug's series again down below too, because he goes through their connection with different churches and different offshoots of Scientology, which then connects to the 3-letter agency, and then it connects to these, you know, if you get into Maury Terry's work, it connects to this guy who was big at Studio 54, who would make we'll say corn dog films in his house for pleasure stuff. And then we're trying to keep this on YouTube, guys, so bear with us. And he was also connected to a producer, Hollywood producer, that lived on Long Island and was famous for corny parties. And the last woman that was technically the victim of the Son of Sam, a woman named Stacy, who did not fit the description. Most of the women were, like Catherine and like Jessica, brunettes. The last victim was a blonde. So she did not fit the description. And it was her specifically that they had evidence that her unaliving was filmed without her knowledge from another car and sold as a corn-based video for people who like corny type videos like that. I hope that makes sense. I apologize again, guys. Not our choice that we have to use these words, but thus is the platform we're on. And so then it connects. So this David Berkowitz guy, this like guy that came from this, and I think I said this with you, Catherine. What's so interesting about this case from the perspective of this group of controllers? Now, I don't see any human life as being disposable, but they always pick these patsies who have quote unquote disposable lives. Because David Berkowitz came from a troubled background. You know, he obviously, I think that there was something going on in his childhood, because he was, what was he showing signs of arson? And
yeah, he was an arsonist. And also in the letter,
you wrote fire down, didn't you, Jessica?
Did, on fire and fire. Yeah, burning. Yeah. I wrote them burning, fire, and on fire. Yeah.
And also you wrote something else down which could be linked, because when the letter was left, and this is how he at one of the crime scenes, and it was signed Son of Sam, which is how it became known as the Son of Sam murders. What it said in the letter, and again, I've got to be really careful how I say this because of the platform we're on. It said that the father, who was called Sam, had been unaliving and assaulting young girls, and that they were buried, and the trauma. So there's a lot of that sort of thing that comes out in some of the words you used, Jessica, and we don't know for sure, but the trauma that David Berkowitz was showing, and this letter specifically said that the person, that's why we don't think the letter was actually written by David Berkowitz, because the real biological sons of Sam were actually locked up in the loft room and locked in rooms, and could see a lot of this going on, but couldn't actually do anything about it as children. So it could be quite possible that David Berkowitz, because he was a neighbour, had witnessed some of this behaviour going on as well.
Because, yeah, he loved to set things on fire as a kid. And I know that is a sign, isn't it, of trauma. And that's crazy. I because you said, will you read your list again, Jessica, just one more time, everything that you found, just so we can hear it again?
Yes. Okay. So the sensory data is green, woodsy, running. Speaking of something, hairy, oblong, tight, anxious, burning, late, dizzy, rapid. That was my sensory data. Then I my analytic overlay of that. I wrote down fuel, trees, treaty, forest, forest friends, short-winded, out of breath, anxiety, bend, fire, on fire, rapid heart rate, REM, turtle, zoned out, in the zone, burlap, and run laps. And then some more of my sensory data is open and vast. My AOL for that, I started picking up on the army, something that was senseless. Something I was out, I felt like I was outdoors, it was dark. I wrote down new path, trails, on the trail. And then I wrote down, I heard nail on the head. And then I wrote down lonely and lost, and I was coming up with a missing information, tourniquet, bleeding, and I heard it will be found. And then that was the end.
Well, missing information is very relevant to everything, because the crazy thing is, I'm going to have you, if you want homework, Jessica, there's a series on Netflix that they made over this Maury Terry's. Now, at the end, they try to make Maury Terry sound like an idiot at the end, because we know that Netflix is part of the problem, don't we? But it's interesting because you hear a lot of the people that experience this talk about this situation. Some of the people that got shot like survived it. And then you have a lot of the and Catherine, isn't it interesting?
Most were in the head as well.
Yeah.
Most shot in the head, and you said nail on the head.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was so weird about it before they put it together in terms of the so-called serial killer was the fact that it was so close up that they were shot and all shot through the head.
Yeah, I mean, one case, they're all sad, because a lot of the girls that were shot were basically children. Like, they were like 18, 19, 20 years old. One girl was walking home from school with her textbook in her hand, and the guy walked up to her, and she put her book up to try to block it, and it went straight through the book into her head. The first case, a woman named Donna, she was getting out of her friend's car in the middle of the night from going clubbing, and a guy came out with a trench coat on, got on his knee, and shot her. So there's no motive. Like, the police had no motive. There was no robbery. There were no assaults, nothing like that. They just were like target practice. But then we have David Berkowitz later. And it's interesting when you look at the footage from him right when he's arrested, you can tell he's under mind control, can't you? Like, what we know now of people who've been through some sort of brain scrambling, his tweakiness. But now when he's filmed all these years later, because he's still alive, he's still in prison, he seems a lot calmer and a lot more able to kind of speak precisely about what's going on. And he does seem to back what Maury Terry has said, that this was a group of, he was not responsible for all of the shootings. So, and it's interesting too, I want to remind people that because he pled guilty and because he was put into a mental institution for a little while, they did give him the opportunity to parole, which I know sounds very strange, but he has asked with every parole hearing not to be released. And towards lately, he's just hasn't been showing up for parole hearings. And he claims it's because he feels like he needs to be in prison for his crimes, to pay back his crimes. But Catherine, we kind of alluded, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's afraid.
Well, you can see in a lot of the interviews that he's very afraid. And obviously we know it is possible to get to people in prison, but he's definitely very, very afraid. And he also raises a lot of the connections with cults and satanic rituals and things outside of what he was, outside of the basic, straightforward serial killing.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's become a evangelical Christian at this point, which of course I have my own issues with that. But I think he's doing it from a very intentionally good place, where he's trying to like correct his karma. And you're right, you can see on the interviews he has a huge scar on his throat, from where you can see he was attacked at one point in prison. So he has this huge scar across his throat. So And it's crazy to think that they would parole somebody who's labeled, because even though I don't think he's a serial killer, because I believe the information that Maury Terry, that he was mind controlled, he was a Manchurian candidate basically, and that he was part of this, he had gotten involved in this satanic group. But by the letter of the law, he has been convicted of being the son of Sam serial killer. So by the letter of the law, why would they then parole somebody who is a serial killer? You know, it's very fast. So it's almost like the NYPD and the government of New York knows that really he's harmless. Does that make sense?
He did admit to some of the killings, but, you know, was saying that he had the voice of a dog telling him to do it.
And well, the furry friends you bring up, I know you say usually that's for like Bigfoot, but when you said furry friends, I was like, this group specifically sacrificed German Shepherds and would drink the German Shepherds' bloods too, which to me is just filthy. And so I just, when you said that, I was like, oh my God, the dog connection, which goes back to the Process Church, which we're going to cover in a later episode. So yeah. It's wild. I want you, Jessica, to now watch the series so you can see. I wonder if you're going to see more from your remote viewing. Did you get?
I have to watch it.
Did you get that it was a group? Did you feel like you were in a group of people when you were in a sensory?
You know, I was picking up on a lot of different stuff, so I can't say I felt like there was a big group there when I was getting this data. I don't know. Like I said, you know, I had no idea what this was. I was just getting information, was just flooding in. So I was just writing it down. So I don't think I ever felt like there was a big group there, but I was feeling like
could be 4 or 5.
lonely.
Well, we know David Berkowitz was probably very lonely, and that's why he got sucked into this in the series. They interview this guy that kind of went to one of their meetings. And it seems kind of clever how they do this, because at that point when you're a teenager, people, you know, kids want to play around with witchcraft. They want to do fun little magic stuff. And it's for most people, it's harmless. They end up growing out of it, and they, you know, but do you remember that, Catherine, in the series where the one guy, do you want to tell Jessica a little bit about that, like that panicky feeling that?
Yeah, so he went along to 1 or 2 of the meetings, and initially it was pretty harmless. And then he heard I'm sorry to say this in front of your dog, the German Shepherd dog being sacrificed. And then he was like, I've got to get the hell out of here. This is not funny anymore. This is absolutely horrendous. And he realized it wasn't just some harmless fun. They were actually serious. Yeah. And also there were a lot of, in the building in Undermeyer Park, they found a lot of satanic symbols, bloodstains. Where did they find the bodies of the dogs?
In the park.
In the park.
They were in the park, the German Shepherds. They didn't even try to hide those bodies, because it's not, I mean, because of Mr. T, it's now a felony to hurt a animal. That was one of the first things Mr. T did when he got to office, was make it a felony to hurt an animal as well as a child. People don't want to talk about that. But, you know, to find a dead dog, unfortunately, is not the same as finding a human body, right? So they would just leave the dog bodies. Well, we also have people say that there were also dead bodies buried in Untermeyer Park from human. And I'm sorry, if somebody's willing to sacrifice an innocent dog, they're willing to sacrifice an innocent person too, in my opinion. So, you know, it's so they're basically going into Untermeyer Park doing these rituals, and I don't think it probably was like 4 or 5 people at a time. You know, the people in Yonkers at that time would complain about hearing chanting from the park and seeing like torches in the park, but nothing. This was in the 70s in New York City. The NYPD weren't going to do anything, right? They were defunded. There was a lot going on in New York at that time. They couldn't go manage hooligans as they thought in a park, right? Just leave them. They didn't. I don't think they. You know, of course, there might have been some police officers that knew what was going on, but for the most part, I think some of the police officers were stuck in a corporate office and of the NYPD, and probably just thought it was kids being kids, and no need to they're not hurting anybody. They're just messing around in a derelict park, you know, and little do we know there were actually adults there doing really bad stuff and setting it up for these Sons of Sam killings to happen. And it's interesting, something that Doug mentioned that we didn't speak about last week, Catherine, and this kind of gets into the process church. Their point was to try to bring on the end of time too. So they were trying to create a bunch of chaos, and chaos they created. And so people will argue, well, why didn't, if this was a group of people after David Berkowitz was arrested, why didn't the killings continue? Well, first, who's to say they didn't continue, just in different manners? And second of all, if one guy's already taken the patsy, why are you going to bring attention to yourself? You know, they don't want to be caught. They don't want people to know. That's why they've tried to bury Maury Terry's work. But the loneliness too, when you said that, it was like loneliness, isolation. I felt that both for David Berkowitz and Maury Terry.
Very much.
Of them. Because this basically killed Maury Terry. This put him in the hospital, this work he did. So, Catherine, is there anything else you want to bring up with this case? And Jessica?
I think it's quite interesting when you looked at some of the other stuff like Tourniquet and Doug. One of the things that Doug and Maury Terry then made the connection is back to other cults going back a long while. And when you look at, say, some of the Manson things that they did, it ties in, you know, I know you could say that about a lot of gruesome situations, but this is one of the things is the connection that this was much bigger. There were some very powerful people involved, and the film industry was very much part of it, you know, making these films to be distributed in nefarious areas was very much part of it as well.
And paving new trails, did you say new paths? Like new paths?
Yeah, new paths, trails, and on the trail. Like somebody's on the trail of something. Yeah.
They're on, so that could be Maury Terry on the trail. Yeah. That could also be them on the trail to create chaos in the world, to bring about the end of time. But I did pick up a lot of, I don't know about you, Catherine, knowing the story, I picked up a lot of Maury Terry and what she was of what she was feeling too, with the loneliness, the anxiety. Because he went to the NYPD. He was like, "Look, guys, this is pretty obvious that there's a killer on the loose, and you don't have the right guy. You have one of the guys, but not the whole story." And they shut him out completely. Case closed. It's over. It's done. You know.
And tried to make him look like a complete lunatic. Yeah. And a lot of the witnesses, there were so many. Okay, so the other thing that was really significant was there were witnesses to a lot of the murders, and all the sort of, what do you call them, photo fits, but not photo fits, you know, where they draw the diagrams that draw the pictures of the people from the witness statements. None of them matched with David Berkowitz. So they were all very, very different. And this is what that tied up with David Berkowitz's story, that he was present at them, but it was different people actually doing the deed. And, you know, some of them weren't even close fits, you know, so there was so much evidence to show that there wasn't one person, but there was a huge amount of pressure on the police force to make an arrest and close the case.
I mean, one of the witness testimony sketches, or a couple of them, looked identical to John Carr. To Sam Carr's son, which is actually the actual son of Sam.
Yeah.
And it was in the docu-series, I'm paraphrasing, they see something like, very rarely is an eyewitness wrong. Like, you can usually see the resemblance from the sketch, and like when they catch the person, you can see, but in this case, he matches none of the descriptions. And they basically, the NYPD is like, basically, oh, the witnesses are wrong. The NYPD's not wrong. The witnesses who were there and saw it happen, they're the ones who are wrong. And I want to make that very clear. A lot of the victims' families that survived, and the people that did survive, they have backed Maury Terry. They've backed Maury Terry, that he was correct, that David Berkowitz was not responsible for all these killings. So, and
the car, the yellow Beetle as well.
Yeah, there was a yellow Volkswagen Beetle that was not the car that David Berkowitz was driving. It was Michael Carr, one of the cars had a yellow Beetle. So this whole thing, you guys, and of course, I'll link everything down in the description box below, and I'll link Doug's series as well down in the description box below, because that's part of what we're trying to do, is go through his work since he passed away. I have my suspicions about his passing, but because he was definitely a very strong whistleblower. So that was awesome, Jessica. Is there anything else? I know it was a quick episode today, guys, because I know Catherine has to jump on a separate call, but But is there anything else you guys want to add to this before we close out?
No, this is amazing. I mean, I enjoy doing these. I do. Now, from an outsider looking in, because I don't know anything about this case, it sounds like there might be some insiders that knew what was going on in the police force. I don't know. I'm just saying.
If they would
sounds
speak up,
suspicious.
it's been, I mean, that was 1976. So it's been, I wonder if any of the lead guys, I know one of the Joe Bordatelli or whatever, he was on the series. My mic falls. I wonder if that's spirit trying to talk. Anyway, he was on the series, but even the people higher than him, I wonder if some of them are even still alive. Because they would have been like, the guys that were really in charge would have been like, what, their 40s and 50s at that point in 1976.
Yeah.
So would they even be still around? But that would be interesting if someone from the NYPD spoke up at this point.
Mhm.
Because the NYPD, I mean, that's probably one of the most famous police departments in the United States. And Lord have mercy, I'm not saying I would want to be a police officer in New York. I can't imagine what that must be like. But yeah, it does seem like, you know, and Todd and I have talked about that. Like, we've listened to a lot of stuff about this, like the likelihood for some of the police officers, it might have been an ego thing to have to admit that you botched the case. For some of them, they could have been in on it and been like, we're a part of this too, and we're not saying anything. And there could be some police officers that knew Maury Terry was right, but they weren't high up in the chain, so they had no recourse to be like, we need to reopen this case. And you even said, you brought up a good point, Catherine, in the series, even when they bring new information to this day, don't they just say, shut it off?
Yeah, it's gone, file it, you know. So because there was so much pressure to have this wrapped up, you know, there was a new election for a mayor going on at the time, and it was all very political, so they wanted it done and dusted so that it was hidden under the car, and no one was looking back into the connections. And when you go through the documentary, there's so many connections that you know, oh, what tangled web, you know, to other so-called serial killers and cult activities. I think one of the things that you were saying about the hunting and the missing really ties down to that victim who was found in the church. You know, the fact that it actually said that they were hunted down, and no one sort of looked into that. It was quite shocking, really. Some of the parents, the last victim, of the blonde lady, Stacey, and her mother was like, there's no way, you know, there's witnesses, there's no way this was the person, but they just didn't want to hear it. And just absolutely tragic, the fact that the right people haven't been brought to justice. So absolutely, David Berkowitz did admit he was involved and he did commit some of the deeds, but not all of them. It was very obvious he didn't do all of them, which means there's people still out there that did.
And I feel like, I mean, I'm sure Sam Carr is no longer alive because he was quite elderly when this was happening. We know John and Michael are no longer alive. And we know that the producer was found killed. The guy from Studio 54 that was filming this stuff was found killed. Their murders have continually gone on unsolved. Why is that? Why would a big producer have an
and girlfriend
and his girlfriend just unsolved? So you guys, we know, I've said this before, like, there's no honor amongst thieves. In this cabal, in this group, this dark group of satanic rituals, they'll turn on each other. They'll throw each other under the bus. It's dog eat dog. No pun intended, but dogs actually, I think, are a lot better than these people. But you know, they're gonna turn on each other in order to cover something up, in order to hide something. And it seemed to be that with the people with John Carr, Michael Carr, because John Carr, it did seem from some of his army buddies that he was about to crack. He was about to crack, and then all of a sudden he's dead. Michael Carr, same thing. You wonder that with the guy from Studio 54 and the producer in Long Island, were they also about to crack and speak? And if so, who took them out? Because if John Carr and Michael Carr are both gone now, and David Berkowitz is behind bars, then who was their killer? Was it someone from the NYPD? I don't know. Was it somebody higher up that knew they needed to take these people out because they were about to talk? I don't know. You know, it's just, thank God that's not the life I live. Could you imagine how stressful it must be to be in a satanic cult? I can't imagine like the amount of anxiety you would have all the time that someone was going to turn on you, you know?
Well, and you have empathy. We have empathy, and we're not the same as that. You know what I mean? Like, I like to think that everybody's the same as me, and like I love everybody. You know, I mean, not like, I mean, there are people that don't like me, and I know that. You know, but still, I don't live like that. I couldn't imagine. I just couldn't imagine. Not everybody is the same as we are. You know what I mean?
And this is what was so sad when you see David Berkowitz interviewed, is he did have empathy. He wouldn't speak up. He was initially very scared because they threatened his father, who was actually his adoptive father. His adoptive mother was actually dead because she died when he was a teenager. But yeah, this is the thing, is when you see him, but he was just such a, by him, if they'd have bumped him off in prison, it would have opened up more questions. So by keeping him alive, it's sort of keeping it shown they knew that he was too scared to really talk up and do much about it. Although he did give away a lot of information in the end.
And coming out of the brain fog of mind control, that's why I think John and Michael Carr, they worked on these kids from a very early age.
Yeah.
To mind control them and disassociate them and all that kind of stuff. And then when they started coming out of that, that's when I think you see the reality of their own moral compass. But, you know, it just, as crappy as your childhood was, at least your parents weren't doing what Sam Carr was doing. You know, you always have to look like at least you weren't raised in a satanic cult. You know, that's the silver lining for all of us, going, you know, shitty things happened in my childhood, but at least that wasn't one of them. Because what we're learning, I know, Jessica, you know a lot about this. What we're learning is that there are a lot more bad people in the world than we actually realized before all of this started. Because you're right, Jessica, we do look at the world, or at least I think that's the mistake. I know my therapist has said this. My boyfriend's therapist has said this. When you're a quote unquote healthy-minded person, meaning you have empathy, you have a moral compass, you can't understand the thinking of somebody who doesn't have a healthy mind.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense to you to hurt an innocent girl coming home from a club, or to hurt a girl coming home from school, or to hurt a dog, or to even strive to do so, to cause chaos. That would never occur to you to do that kind of stuff. So it's a sad, we picked planet Earth to come to, and this is the ride we're on. So all right, you guys, anything you guys want to close out with before we sign off for today?
No, I think I'm going to be watching Netflix for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I think you will. It was absolutely fascinating. I was completely glued to it because I knew nothing about the case at all. And once it started, I was completely glued to it. And it's interesting for me, and it's interesting how much detail they do go into in that series. And isn't this the way that we're learning that they don't want to make it an obvious cover up? So it's fascinating to see that information is out there. So I can't wait to hear what you think and what you pick up, Jessica, once you've watched it. I think that would be really, really interesting.
And I'll invite you here on the show, Jessica. I've put a call out to, Catherine and I spoke about this off air, and I don't even think I told you this. I put the word out to some people that I know, that we know, that grew up in this cult, to look through this case. They're whistleblowers now, to look through this case and join us on another episode to see what they've seen in this case. And Jessica, come on with us for that group. We don't have it scheduled yet. I've just reached out to them to look through this stuff and give us feedback from what they spotted as someone who grew up like David Berkowitz, in this, and are now speaking out against it. So they can even point out stuff that we didn't even consider because we didn't grow up. Like, why girls with brown hair? You know, Catherine and I in our last episode speculated over why it was a German Shepherd. Actually, I had no idea. Catherine brought up a good point because they're kind of the real alpha of the dog. Oh, you got yours right there.
Speaking of which, okay, mine. She came up whining again. She heard you talking about German Shepherds, Bryce.
That gives me chill bumps, because honestly, that's one of the hardest things to face with this group, is what they did to these dogs. Mm-hmm. That was the hardest of everything, because dogs are so innocent. Oh. What's her name?
The German Shepherd as well. Absolutely gorgeous dog. So yeah, and I think you know, it is going to be absolutely fascinating to see what you think of this. And yeah, don't jump off because I've got someone else who's made a connection that I'll tell you both about once we've turned the cameras off.
Awesome. Ooh, suspense for our viewers, though.
Yeah.
All right, you guys.
Don't worry, you'll be hearing about it, viewers, but I can't say their name on camera at the moment. Yeah.
We're trying to get everything together for you guys to continue this series. Once again, I'm going to put our past episode with Catherine down in the description box, my Untermeyer Park episode, and Doug's series. Keep subscribing to his channel. I don't know how long YouTube will keep his channel up, but I think Rumble will probably keep it up longer. So he is also on Rumble and BitChute, so make sure you're subscribed. And I'm going to be putting Catherine's channels and Jessica's channels down in the description box as well. So if you're not subscribed to Catherine or Jessica, go get subscribed, because if you like this stuff we're talking about, you will love both their channels if you're not already subscribed to them, you guys. And we'll be doing this again very soon. So I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Don't go hurting anybody. Just say no to satanic cults. They're not cute. So all right, you guys. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Jen.
Bye.